That's all right.
My name is Stephen Crabtree. I'm in the Vasquez High School Advanced Vocal Group, The Herd. And we're going to be having our final concert on May 31st at the Acton School Multipurpose Room. And I would like to extend a personal invitation to all of you.
Thank you. When is it again?
It's May 31st. I believe it starts at 5 p.m. 5 or 6 p.m.
Here?
It's at Acton School. They haven't 100% confirmed the time yet, but I can send you guys all emails.
Yes, please. That's what I was going to suggest. Thank you.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's come back to 8.6 and just finish up this section here.
Sure.
Any other comments?
I did want to, on behalf of Mr. Layton, he wanted to apologize for his absence as well tonight. I think he wanted me to, this is one of the first times he's been absent, and he's, I think it's his granddaughter's graduation.
Same girl that got the...
That's correct. Yeah, so he wanted me to make sure
Very
he
valid.
announced that, and he felt bad about it, but I promised him I would. That's all I have.
And then board members, anything else? Just
Yeah, I wanted to, I got some information that I thought was kind of apropos to some of the issues that we're facing. So I wanted to just mention it to keep it in perspective. It came out last week about how we're struggling to keep student population, and how our kindergarten enrollment is low, and that sort of thing. And we tend to, as we should, we tend to criticize ourselves for a lack of an ed program or parent satisfaction or whatever. But we also keep saying that there's a lot of other factors that are associated with the lack of student population and the lack of enrollment, ranging anywhere from reductions in birth rates, people leaving the state, to economic and home ownership, and ability to move properties. The La Cañada Unified School District sits just north of Glendale, east of Glendale, in the La Crescenta area. They're somewhat similar to us in that they have, we have a population of 16,000, they have a population of 20,000. And their school district has only a small number of schools, but they do have 4,000 kids enrolled in total, which the first underscore for me continues to show that we're underrepresented in our student population, because we should be upwards to 3,000 kids in everything we look at, including this school. What's a little unique about their school district is they have a combined middle school, high school. They don't have a middle school, they don't have a high school, they have a middle school, high school. Mm-hmm. It has a 2,100 student population. And what's really, and they have 3 elementary schools. Now what's really outstanding about them is that their middle school, high school has an absolutely astounding API of 928.
oh wow.
Their middle school, high school, and their 3 elementary schools are not just all California distinguished schools, but every one is a national blue ribbon school. Okay. Education doesn't get more effective or better than the La Cañada Unified School
It's a
District.
very wealthy area.
It's a very wealthy area. Incorporated not too long ago, because they wanted to be their own enclave. Okay. So with that in mind, here's why I'm bringing this up. Despite all of this great stuff that they have going, and despite their blue ribbon schools and 928 scores, they're struggling. This year, thus far, for their 3 elementary schools, they have a total registration for 13-14 of 122 students. That's it. Last year, the current year that we're in,
You mean as a cohort?
as a cohort,
Yeah.
new kids coming in,
Kindergarten class. Or
we only have 122
Yeah.
applicants. Okay. Last year, they had 172.
Mm.
The year before that, they were into the 200s, and they're dropping precipitously. Okay, does that sound familiar? We're not alone. So when we,
It's Texas.
in this issue,
It's the fault of Texas.
the year before that, it was 162. So what they've done is they now have instituted this allowance, and it's currently capped at 25%, and they were thinking about raising it, where they allow students from other districts into their district in order to make up for this loss of homegrown student population. But because of the same issues that we address with you're importing who from where, is they cap it at 25%. So for every 4 students that are homegrown, there's 1, or for every 3 students that's homegrown, they allow 1 from outside. And they had a big deal their last board meeting where they, do we want to raise that? And they chose to keep it at 25% for right now. But here's what continues to be interesting. The superintendent says that if they want to maintain a comprehensive high school program, they must have an annual new cohort of 250. Does that sound familiar? Right? Where every year we go, oh, how are we going to manage populations in the 7th grade and 8th grade and the 9th grade if we're starting out so low? And they're struggling now with how they're going to maintain, if their student population continues to drop, how they're going to maintain a comprehensive high school, because they're not going to have the funding available, because they're not going to have the student population, and it's going to create all of that cascading issues with class offerings and everything else. And then lastly, the president of their school board just posted on their website a message where he indicated the governor's financing strategies and the whole thing that the governor instituted with the local control financing, the LCF, which is supposedly designed to, in part, help suffering school districts who have lower income. It's supposed to help.
Certainly.
And they've already, and when you're a larger school district, you have the benefit of doing this sort of thing that we don't. In examining it, evaluating it, and looking at it, they're looking at this as basically kind of a false funding mechanism, because if you would just go back to funding the schools the way they used to fund the schools, but because even with this LCF program that is designed to help schools in trouble, it's going to result in less funding than the normal structure, which is again what we keep saying here. We're asked to provide an education under an old educational program and processing model without the benefit of the same funding model. So when we start looking at bringing in kids from the outside, when we start looking at the adoption of charter schools, we start looking at other ways to fill in the funding gap, we are in the same rowboat without paddles that every other school district is in. And if the La Cañada Unified School District is having these issues and a lack of student population, and it's certainly not because they're underperforming, what does it say about everybody else?
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
So I bring it all up just as a matter of perspective in terms that they're
I
facing
sure
the same
appreciate
thing
the time
we
for that.
I think that the interesting question there, though, would be, I think you're probably right. But it would be, in a perfect world, we really know. We really know where their kindergartners are going, where our kindergartners are going. If there's just no more of them, there's no more of them. But in the case of La Cañada, knowing a lot of folks there, they're so wealthy that even with a great school, the density of private schools in the Pasadena, La Cañada area, I think, I have the statistic right, is higher than anywhere else in the country, including Connecticut, New York, suburbs of Boston. So there's intense competition in that particular area, right, where money's not an object. But I take your point. I think.
And to note, their population is dropping. Their population census, the numbers in 2010 are lower than they were in 2000. They've dropped a couple hundred. Okay. But this would be consistent with the phenomena of reduced birth rates. It would be consistent with the phenomena of the fact that you're talking about, I don't know what swath of area La Cañada Unified covers. It might extend beyond the city of La Cañada, because those borders aren't the same. School district and municipal borders aren't the same. But the fact is, no matter what it is, they are a small school district, and they only service a small population, just
Yeah.
like we do. And small school districts are disproportionately impacted by reduced birth rates, competition with other schools, funding, that sort of thing. So they're so although they are so different from us, they are at the same time so similar to us in terms of their struggle and what they're going to need to maintain their high school program, and this domino effect that's created. So again, this is why, for our purposes here at home, this board is struggling with trying to find new ways, innovative ways, entrepreneurial ways to maintain a viable education program in light of everything that I just said. And we're not the only ones suffering it. So I just thought it would be a good foundational stage for discussion about the budget tonight. And if La Cañada isn't immune from it, who is?
Yep.
Thank you for the time you put into this.
Mr. Porter, any comments?
No comment.
I don't have any comments.
Trying to elaborate a little bit on some of the additional reductions that we're taking a look at, and identify any gaps and potential resolutions as well. And so I'll turn it over to Steve.
So,
Was this in our Dropbox?
No, not yet, no. We just finished it like 5:30, but I'll put a PDF in your Dropbox. Would you like me to do that now, or?
You don't have to do it now, but
Okay.
I'd like to have it.
I will put it in
for reference
Dropbox for
purposes.
you.
I didn't, because I've been gone, I didn't know if I missed the sync on it or.
No, actually, Steve and I were working on it
All right.
at 5:30 today.
Okay.
So this is kind of an update based on the information that I was able to gather at the May Revise conference, as Dr. Lewis mentioned. According to May Revise, the governor has basically projected that he would like to move forward with the local control funding formula.
Of course, not this year.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of resistance, as Mr. distasso mentioned earlier. It's not a very equitable formula. There's some challenges to implementing it. This is one of those things we have to keep in mind, that the state has been under this current revenue limit system for the last 40 years, since the early 70s. So making such a drastic change to LCFF is not something that would happen in a year. I'd anticipated that it would be moving further along than it is, but there is quite a bit of resistance for a number of reasons. Part of it has to do with the fact that certain districts receive advantages. They receive advantages in terms of their population. They have a high percentage of population that are free and reduced price lunch, English language learners, foster children. Those districts would receive everyone receives a base grant. Those districts that have a higher proportion receive a 35% increase, along with a 50% concentration grant with population over 50%. So if your population of free and reduced English language learners, etc., exceeds 50%, then you get a concentration grant. And so that creates some inequities for districts that don't have that population.
I keep getting my case names wrong here. Didn't the Williams Valenzuela Act, or there was an issue that came up over the state doing this before, where school districts sued the state because of the inequity, and it brought back a more consistent revenue limit application. Isn't this moving away from that very thing?
Yeah, I think you're referring to Serrano versus Priest, and that was a long time ago, and that was a very similar issue of equity. And it seems like it's very hard to come up with the magic bullet that will satisfy everyone, because there's almost 1,000 school districts in the state. The populations, the demographics vary dramatically. Transportation funding varies. Some districts here, just in this county, don't do any transportation. If you're out in a rural area like we are, transportation is a big deal. You need to provide transportation to bring those students in.
So let's go back to, because I think it's important, you brought up the La Cañada issue, and this really impacts districts like La Cañada and ourselves, where you don't have high numbers of populations in those districts, so your funding remains basically flat, and all the others go back up to what I want to consider Prop 98 values. So they're still violating Prop 98, okay, which is the law. They're still well below that funding mechanism. And so again, it creates additional inequities. And obviously, I'm not in favor of it for this particular district. If you're in a district, let's say, for example, Palmdale School District, some of the ones down in LA, those districts will have a glut of cash into their district. That to me, obviously, in addition to the categoricals that are already received for those special populations, the EL, LEP, the Title III, EIA type of funding that they currently receive, which they receive more funding than we do already.
So that's sort of the pushback right now is that's the reason that the governor's basically stated that he wants to move forward with this, and now the legislature is kind of looking at this and saying, wait a minute, there's a lot of pushback because of the fact that there's not a level of equity, and there are winners and losers under LCFF, and so given that, we have no choice but to basically continue planning the way we've done in the past with the current revenue limit system. The governor talks about reducing the wall of debt, which is the whole concept of principal apportionment deferrals, and he talks about buying down some of those deferrals, but it's not going to be bought down completely. There are still going to be cash deferrals next year. It got up to as high as 45%. Numbers down a little bit from that, but it is expected to continue.
So, Prop 30 was sold, when you read the fine print, that it was supposed to cure either the amount of deferral time or the cash amount of the deferral itself. Are we suggesting that despite Prop 30, that neither one of those are going to get fixed, either the amount of time that the deferrals last or the actual amount, dollar value of the deferral, if you know?
Well, instead of having 45% of the cash deferred, it would be more like 30 to 35%. So the amount of deferrals, the deferrals will continue. They won't be as extreme as they've been in years past because of Prop 30 and some additional revenues the state's gotten. We're not out of this.
And the amount of time that the money is deferred remains the same?
Yes. And so the third piece on here is a potential new categorical funding source. We haven't had a new categorical program for quite some time. And this is Common Core Standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. So, if you would please. We've talked about our enrollment as being one of the biggest challenges to our budget. Our P288 came in at 1288, right around where we had anticipated it would be. And so we're still projecting, obviously, about a 35% decline over the last 5 years. That is a dramatic drop in enrollment over a 5-year period. And cannot emphasize the impact that has on such a small school district such as ours. So, we've talked about our deficit being right around
This ties back to
$2 billion.
This ties back to the numbers
We started with.
Yeah,
This was
time.
the original deficit. not
Just
the
a quick preview where we were before.
Right, I'm just trying to get my head around it too.
Yeah.
This is the original deficit before the ask list. Just trying to refresh.
Before the ask list and before we reduced that by
Yeah, I
half.
remember. Yeah.
And we're going to go through this quickly.
Yep.
So we talked about there being a $1.2 million gap, assuming we would eliminate our deficit. We talked about having to reduce the number of FTEs as a result of our enrollment decline. We talked about modifying that target and including some additional classified reductions that would be commensurate with the enrollment reductions. So we get to our revised target, which goes down to a little over $700,000. So the actions we've taken to try and mitigate our deficit, yearly retirement incentive program, we have given a 100% backfill, so there is a net savings there of about $75,000. We've talked about refinancing some debt, which we've done. That helps to offset our deficit further. So our revised target changes down to a little over $600,000.
So, I'm sorry, Dr., on the parse, we're expecting 100% rollout?
This is assuming that.
This
This is a
That's
plan
not what we're
for,
expecting, that's just
this is a
assuming.
plan for the worst, hope for the best scenario.
In other words, it's something for us to talk about.
Don't we now know that?
What's that?
Well, he doesn't have all the numbers yet for what we're going to have next year, right?
Right. And so assuming that we do backfill all those positions, that would have been the.
Gotcha.
Well, we're planning on backfilling 100%. Now, if we can find ways to mitigate that, then we can offset some of that even further.
Thank you.
But we don't want to present you best case scenario and then come in short.
Okay.
So a revised target goes up to a little over 600,000. So we've got some indirect cost money we can collect. This is the sort of innovative new things that we're trying to do to try to generate some revenue. And these estimates, on the low end, we have $120,000 in revenues coming in. On the high end, it would be about a little over $170,000.
What's that put Einstein's enrollment at?
3,
No, I know what they're targeting. I'm wondering what, for conservatism, what you
For
do.
conservative, it's 400, and for optimistic, it's 700 for both the sites
For combined.
combined.
Yeah, combined.
And how much is LA's?
40,000, 40 to 45,000
Dollars.
dollars.
No, but how big, I'm just thinking,
Their
Einstein's saying 323.
their enrollment is 215.
You put them at 250.
No, ALA is at
ALA is at 215.
Einstein,
Between the two of them, you got 400. So, I mean, I'm just trying to.
No, the
When somebody tells me
400, the
conservative.
400 is just the Einstein. In addition to that,
Yeah,
you
but
have the two.
Einstein can't have more than 323.
Yeah, they can.
Well,
I thought they're,
that
We're
was
talking
one
about two
site.
sites.
Remember, it's incremental growth. So the first year, they're going to look at it K1, 2, 3.
right?
However, the other night, just so you'll know as an update, I went to the orientation night.
Yeah.
They had an additional, once that this board approved that, they had an additional 300 students show up. They now have in excess of 1,000 applications to attend that
I
site.
know, I just thought their capacity was
So their
332.
capacity is over 500. The reason why we said 300 is because that's their initial startup.
Right.
They weren't going to do a full
well, that's what he's
school.
talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
But I'm saying now they're rethinking that, and they may go to a full school at 5 1/4.
Okay, so that's the one school. What about the other school?
That's in the 225 range down in San Fernando Valley.
Okay, so that's 700 on the upside.
That's correct.
And then what about the other charter we supervise?
215.
So you're 1,000. You put 400. I just want to get a sense how conservative versus or
Yeah.
progressive we be.
Yeah, on the low end, we're being very conservative.
Okay, but on the high end, if the low ends, I mean, shouldn't I double those numbers to get to
Potential.
what
You
might
could-
happen?
You could, I don't want to
I play with numbers all day long, so tell me what you're doing. You're giving the high or the low or the in-between, or the
No, this
base
is a
case?
conservative. This is planned for the worst.
All right,
This is definitely low end.
all right, that's fine.
And only because we don't know for certain.
That's the right way.
Yeah, we have no idea whether or not they're actually going to show up. And that's why I went to the orientation the other night, just to see how many were actually interested.
Yeah.
So our revised target changes, we get to about 500, a little over 500,000. It's anywhere from 451,000.
Let's go back, Matt, and remember that this number in indirect costs, this number up there, that doesn't also include any of the facilities money that we get, any of the other stuff. So again, it doesn't include the $50,000 for the position. Remember, we had talked
But
about.
includes, that's what that offsets though.
That's what I'm saying.
It does, but
Does it
there's some
help
shell
offset?
games we can play with.
Well, we're going to get 50,000, but we're going to spend 50,000.
Right.
Well, I just don't know if that 50's in the budget already.
Well,
I don't think it is.
not yet, because
Because
we
we
just
had-
got it approved.
yeah,
And
we had to
that's,
approve it.
and we're gonna bring that back to you next time at the next board meeting.
So it's in there, okay.
But we're gonna also play some shell games with that to be able to offset some of the potential categorical dollars. Let me give you an example. If you go back to that categorical piece that we may get for all of our Common Core implementation, we may be able to offset some of that and be able to fund it out of that and then use that 50 grand for the general fund. But it's all kind of like comes out of the same pot. It's basically a service we have to provide to the charters and for your direction.
Well,
But it's, you get it out of categorical, it's restricted. The whole idea here is we're going to spend restricted first.
Now, and I think the Common Core thing, we need to talk about a little bit more. So we're gonna implement this Common Core standard, okay? And we're gonna get categorical funding in order to do it, okay? Now, my question is, what in heaven's name does that mean? And just so that I can have a number to play with, give me a categorical number for Common Core.
The number that's been given was $170 per AA for the Common Core standards.
So for us,
That'd be 220 grand.
okay, so we have 220 grand, okay? Do we, as a district, assume $220,000 of hard dollar expenditures in order to implement
Right.
this core program? In other words, do we have to hire, it may be unfair, but just yes or no. Do we have to hire more people to implement Common Core? Or do we use existing staff?
I would say no, not more people.
So we use existing staff.
We would do more training, more stuff, purchase more things,
Well,
capital outlay.
okay. You went beyond my question.
Okay.
Do we have to hire more people
No.
to implement?
No.
No. So we're gonna get a chunk of money, but we're still gonna have the same salary liability that we have today.
Correct.
And that a salary that we would technically be paying for off of our revenue limit money. Okay. So then we're gonna go buy stuff. So out of the 220,000, if we buy $100,000 worth of stuff, that's a hard dollar expenditure. So theoretically, the $100,000 is money, but we can't, it's not discretionary fund. It's kind of
Restricted.
so I don't know that it helps our budget.
Well, what it would do is that these dollars would be received, and the district would be expected to expend the money over a 2-year period, just like all districts that would get this money. And so any expenditures that we would incur for Common Core standards would be paid for out of these restricted dollars, leaving unrestricted dollars for other purposes. So,
But the unrestricted dollars we wouldn't be spending anyway, because if we didn't have Common Core, we wouldn't be spending those funds.
well, before we talked about Common Core, the question that came up was how are we going to get the money? And that was my question. Well, the state, we're expected to do these things and adopt these math and English standards. Where's the money for it? And that's what a lot of other districts said the same thing. Where's the money? So it appears that the state has indicated that they are willing to provide some money for these.
Because I'm not quite seeing how categorical funds for Common Core helps us to address that issue, because it's just a trade-off. Because we're only getting the money because it's an additional liability that we incur.
Right, but remember our previous example of where we're going to get other categorical, federal category, Title II, Title I, Title III, Title IV, all of those other categoricals we get from the federal side of the house, we had earmarked in Megan's presentation against that effort.
Against the Common Core.
Yes. So now it actually frees up that money. So that's what I'm saying. You end up with a shell game. You have to get, it's the job, and now if we receive restricted funds specifically for that, then it may be in the form of, number one, staff development. It has to. All the teachers need to be trained about how to implement.
Somewhere for the budget development, and it typically happens in the shell game, is you lose where the ball is. That's the whole purpose of the game. So I don't know where the ball is.
Yeah.
I need a roadmap that shows that with implementation of Common Core and the funding that's received from the state for it, that it frees up federal categorical money to apply to other things, which in turn frees up our discretionary money, and that's where we end up with room to cut that. So for me to be able to intelligently say, okay, we can apply a certain amount of money against that without reducing or cutting services, I have to be able to follow that and then have a dollar value attached to it.
But part of the problem is what we were talking about wanting to wait is because we had no idea we were actually going to get this kind of money.
Right.
So if we're planning over here, and then all of a sudden we get an influx of $200,000 for the implementation of Common Core, not to mention we're applying for a waiver, and what does that mean? And. So market gets very convoluted
How
in
do
the
we know if we
implementation
get the
phase.
waiver or not?
What's
How
that?
do we know if we get the waiver?
Well, we're in the process of looking at that and determining whether or not it's in our best interest to do that. If we get the waiver, then we would do a soft implementation. Meaning, you still,
Do the benefits.
even in 13, 14, even though we have Common Core, you also have CSTs, which is the California Standards Test. So you can see, that's why I said soft implementation. So we're still working out the details on that. The state doesn't even know, honestly. So we're getting this stuff 11th hour, just kind of like you guys are. And now we're trying to honestly regroup and rework our budget and find out where that money falls out in terms of whether it's in our federal categorical or, again, as you know, we can't supplant, so I'm not going to use that word. But in essence, what falls out into the general fund where we can spend restricted dollars on, and now we have X amount of dollars fall out in the general fund. That's what we're trying to accomplish right now.